What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Aether and Iron, an upcoming TRPG, I would say, that blends an interesting approach to vehicle combat in an interesting world, on top of a pretty heavy narrative with skill checks and character advancement and the like. But probably worth a mention, you can check this out for yourself via a public demo that's available over on Steam, which is how I'm bringing you this video. That demo was made public at the beginning of this past Steam Next Fest, I believe, but they are keeping it up for people to take a look at it. The game itself is not expected to release until sometime in 2026, so it'll be a little while yet. And while I initially saw this game during the Steam Next Fest, I ultimately had a lot going on at the time, so it took me a little while to get around to taking a look at this. But let's go ahead and dive right into it otherwise. So, Aether and Iron here takes place in an alternative history New York City that followed the invention of this sort of magical ether technology, basically allowing everything to float in the sky, and huge chunks of the city have been turned into islands in the sky, unsurprisingly separated into tiers, with the highest being the fanciest place and the lowest being the slums. This technology has also extended to things like vehicles, allowing them to essentially be flying cars, and due to a bunch of ever-present conflicts, there's a fair bit of crime to go around, starting with all sorts of smuggling operations and the like, odd jobs being taken by characters like our main character Gia here to facilitate some sort of living. Which is actually where our story gets started off. It seems like Gia's had a run of bad luck, but a supposedly easy job promises to turn that around, where our only goal really is to act as a transport for a young woman who is from the upper areas of the city to investigate the lower portions of the city. Unsurprisingly, that goes sideways fast when you're pretty much immediately attacked. And it turns out that our little hanger-on here, Nellie, was actually a scientist studying the well, they call it, a big portion of this ether technology that has gone sideways, and now she's being chased for what she knows, basically, and our goal kind of becomes keeping her out of it, yes, but also trying to get back to our car after it is stolen in the process. And it looks like that story and narrative is relatively interesting. I think they do a good job of setting all this stuff up. There's some mystery, some interesting characters, the things you would probably expect, I imagine. But the narrative side of this game is especially interesting to me because it's not exactly like third-person exploration or anything, but rather it is like 2D point-and-click type of stuff in the given locations that you are in. However, when talking to characters and sometimes interacting with objects, you can roll some dice based on the skills that individual character has. You will eventually have more characters than just Gia, but as they level up through experience and whatnot, we can assign them various skill points, which can then give them both combat abilities, but also things that are effective in these conversations to increase your skills and odds of success. And through this, despite the sort of 2D presentation here, there's a lot going on story-wise. Realistically, however, that's only like half the game, because the other half is these tactical combat battles via these cars. Now, just in case you're wondering, yes, the cars are in fact customizable. That's a pretty big part of this. You'll be able to do things like paint them, swap out parts, and basically customize all the vehicles you have in order to make them the most effective killing machines possible for the tactical turn-based battles, which are, I would say, really the main draw here, because all of these combat encounters seem to take place in the form of these cars running around on active little, I guess you could call them ether highways, where you'll have to not only maneuver your vehicle, but also avoid obstacles while attacking the actual enemies. You can move and then use all of your weapons one time, and then some other stuff based on the individual skills that you'll get for combat from leveling that character up. But the gist of it basically is move your car around and then use a bunch of directionally oriented weapons to attack the enemies as you get near them. What makes this more interesting, however, is the addition of course, various hazards, which if you end your turn in them, which can sort of be forced by ramming characters into them, you're going to be in for a bad time, I imagine. Now, as you would probably expect, some of the upgrades and customization for your vehicle include different types of weapons that you can use in this combat mode, and again, most of those seem to be directional in nature. But even things like swapping out the engine can determine how much energy you have to, of course, navigate and move around. And while I think the demo is relatively simple, I think there's a lot of opportunity here to introduce some potentially very interesting tactical decisions. Like we see a little bit of that here in the demo with like roads splitting in two, which requires you to move back and forth if you want to necessarily track down the individual enemy you're going for. The hazards, which I've already mentioned. And I think if they keep going on that front, it'll be an especially interesting title. And that, combined with the interesting narrative stuff from the 2D point-and-click side of things, altogether, I think makes for a title that is more interesting than its initial presentation might lead you to believe. And as I briefly alluded to earlier, you do eventually get more characters than just Gia, so presumably you will be able to participate in these battles with multiple people at the same time, and a lot of that is done, including taking on missions from your hideout called The Hole, which is one of the places you can navigate through the city with. Now, speaking of though, you'll typically take ferries with your vehicle in between the larger islands, and then travel with your vehicle through those on this sort of 2D map, which is where you can potentially run into what seem to be random encounters, or of course track down your actual main story missions at the same time. So with that and the 2D sort of point and click side of things, there is a little bit of like exploration and side content, that kind of thing. So putting all of that together, I am relatively interested in this. I'll certainly be keeping an eye on it as it heads towards its release in 2026. But for now, I think that's probably just about everything I've got to say on this one, which I certainly hope you enjoyed. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.